Good evening, everyone. This is Stephen M. Wilson. I'm an optometrist in Valdosta, Georgia. This is a picture of my office at North Patterson Street. We've added on 5 times, and currently our building comprises about 12,000 square feet. And in the foreground, you can see our iPod, which is our home delivery optical service vehicle. We call it iPod for personal optical delivery. We won the Vision Monday Resistance is Futile marketing award a few years ago. I'm a 1980 graduate of UAB. I was valedictorian, and I worked for a year overseas in the Cambodian refugee camps in Thailand and Cambodia. And currently, I've been in practice since 1981 at the same location. We've got 4 full-time optometrists, consulting ophthalmologists, and the slide says 35 employees. I think we're up to 38 now. We have 14 exam rooms, 5 pre-test rooms, and a full comprehensive diagnostic and therapeutic facility. I'm a member of the Governor of the State of Georgia Insurance Advisory Commission. I've won several awards, such as Vision Monday. I mentioned before the iPod. I've been on several best practice awards and influential ODs. But I think I'm most widely known for my 15 minutes of fame with the Georgia Supreme Court decision in 2014 on the Wilson versus Spectera case. We're going to talk about whether or not you should participate as an in-network optometrist, an out-of-network optometrist, or an opt-out optometrist with regard to vision insurance plans. And it's real important that you understand that I'm not recommending or directing any discussion with regard to market control, market allocation, terms of sale, business agreements, market arrangements. There's no collusion. This is not, I don't want anything to be construed to be antitrust. With regard to disclosures, I think you go to a lot of meetings and the presenter shows slides as to whether or not they have financial relationships with various vendors, but that's only a requirement if you're representing FDA-regulated items like medicine, medical devices, and contact lenses. However, that is not a requirement when you're speaking about frames, lenses, eyeglasses, and so I do not have to report any financial disclosure. These are my 2 children. My daughter's at Middlebury in Vermont. My son just graduated from William & Mary, and he's attending graduate school at the University of Massachusetts this fall. Pause it, please. Michael, pause it.
There we go.
There's great news today. I'm excited that everyone has taken the time out of their busy schedule, their busy lives, to see how they can improve their practice. I'm going to talk to you about improving your patient service, your practice profitability, and how to enjoy your practice more. We're going to discuss both opt-out, opt-in, and out-of-network as a network provider. We're going to discuss whether or not you should participate in which vision plans, whether or not to install an optical lab, and how to transition from the insurance optical model to the private provider optical model. We have several things we're going to talk about today. There's going to be a lot of information. We're going to drill down into cost of goods, look at optical profit, how to avoid audit pitfalls, because when you start challenging the vision insurance plan's optical fulfillment system, there can be a lot of audits. But most of all, we're going to talk about improving the patient service, which is what your practice is all about. Ask yourself, are you confident that when you're examining a patient, that your optical dispensary and your staff are choosing the right frame and lens for the patient with regard to vision insurance? Are they using the right codes? Are they collecting the right copays? Do you really know if the right frame inventory is out front? And are you really giving that Ritz-Carlton, Disney-type high-level patient service that everyone speaks about in patient management meetings? We're going to talk about, again, patient service, but we're going to speak about optical quality, the timeliness of delivery, how it affects patient volume, can you afford to go out of network, and do you need to put an in-house optical lab, or are you going to outsource your optical lab? We're going to discuss in detail both frame and contact lens inventory. So we're going to really dissect your office, and it'll help you decide which path you need to choose. This slide is my cost of goods. We're consistently under 20%, and it's important that you understand that we are sourcing everything in my office. After I won the Supreme Court case November 4th, 2013, we chose to be what's called an opt-out office. That means we are in network with vision insurance plans, but we've chosen to source all frames, lenses, eyeglasses, and contact lenses from our own inventory and our own optical lab. And that means that every patient, whether or not they have VSP or Spectera, Davis, etc., is purchasing a frame directly from Wilson Eye Center. They're purchasing the lenses directly from Wilson Eye Center, and they're purchasing the contact lenses directly from Wilson Eye Center. So this is a true cost of goods. For those of you, which is the majority of you, or 99.9% of you, you really don't understand your cost of goods, because your cost of goods is skewed because you may, if you're in network with Spectera or Davis, they're supplying you frames. You're only being paid a dispensing fee, let's say. You're not getting an optical lab bill from a VSP lab or a Davis Vision lab or a Spectera. So when you look at your cost of goods, you're really not sure what your cost of goods are. Yes, you're getting chargebacks, but you really don't know what your cost of goods. But this is a true cost of goods measurement right here. We are sourcing all products from our own inventory and our own optical lab. There's a minor exception with VSP on the Fed VIP plan, which is the federal insurance plan, and that has to do with federal civilians who choose to purchase vision insurance themselves. We track our lab spoilage. This is real important when you start sourcing all your materials directly yourself. One of the keys to controlling your cost of goods is obviously not making a lot of mistakes. And these mistakes can be lab mistakes, doctor remakes, frame changes, seg height changes, slippage in the edger in the lab, various things like that. We track it. Our goal is to be below 2% on our spoilage. I think the national average is around 8%, so we try to keep it under 2%. And you're sitting here, a lot of you go to meetings and you discuss glaucoma and you discuss the latest in OCTs and dry eye management and so forth. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that my office, we're a very heavy medical office, meaning that we co-manage LASIK, we co-manage cataract surgery, we do foreign bodies, we treat conjunctivitis, glaucoma, we co-manage retinal disease with our retinal specialists. So we practice full therapeutic, diagnostic and therapeutic optometry, but we also practice full scope optical optometry. A lot of people don't think in terms of optometry with regard to the optical. And when we filed the case against Spectera, nobody really quite comprehended what we were trying to fight for. And so I'll back up just for a minute and just explain why I think this is important. Optometrist licensure allows you to examine a patient, to diagnose the patient, and to treat the patient. And in some states, you can do minor surgery and minor laser procedures. But your licensure specifically authorizes you to prepare and supply frames, lenses, eyeglasses, and contact lenses directly to the patient. Well, before my case in all 50 states, there was a restriction on your licensure, and that restriction said that a vision insurance company could restrict your ability to prepare and supply frames, lenses, eyeglasses, and contact lenses directly to the patient because you had to order the frames, lenses, eyeglasses, and contact lenses from the vision insurance optical lab fulfillment system. So you did not control the entire process. You could not order the frame or supply the spectacle lens or the contact lenses directly to the patient. Those products were being supplied from the vision insurance optical fulfillment system to the patient. You were just a conduit and you got paid a dispensing fee. In my opinion, that's a restriction of your licensure. To put it in better perspective, let's say that in your state that you're allowed to treat glaucoma, that Blue Cross Blue Shield said, we're going to establish a chain of glaucoma clinics across the state, and all the optometrists in the state of Texas, let's say, can no longer treat glaucoma. Once the optometrist makes the diagnosis of glaucoma, then those patients have to go to the Blue Cross Blue Shield owned glaucoma clinics and receive the visual fields, the OCT, the pachymetry, etc. And the patient can go back to the optometrist for exams for eyeglasses and so forth, but the Blue Cross Blue Shield system is going to control the glaucoma treatment process. Well, all the optometrists, I think, would close their offices, march on the Capitol and say, how dare they restrict our ability to treat glaucoma. We're licensed to treat glaucoma. It's a restriction of our licensure. Well, to me, the restriction on the optical process is no different from glaucoma. It may not be as well received or as highly thought of as making a pair of glasses, but your licensure allows you to prepare and supply eyeglasses and contact lenses. Well, the vision insurance plan said we're going to establish a network of optical labs, and the patient can no longer receive the optical fulfillment services directly from your office. They have to receive those optical products from the vision insurance lab, and that's a restriction of your licensure, but nobody said anything. Well, we decided to challenge that. November 4th, 2013, Georgia became the first state to practice to the full extent of its licensure. And somebody would argue, well, Oklahoma can use lasers, and I would say, yeah, they can use lasers, but their licensure is still restricted. Georgia's the only state at the time that could practice the full extent of its licensure. Yes, we can't use lasers, but we can examine the patient, we can diagnose the patient, we can treat the patient, and we can prepare and supply eyeglasses and contact lenses directly to the patient. In Oklahoma, yes, they have lasers, but guess what? They still have to use the vision insurance optical lab fulfillment system, so therefore their licensure is restricted. They're not practicing to the full extent of your licensure. Unfortunately, the term practicing to the full extent of your licensure is typically thought of as the therapeutic practice, and that is incorrect. The practicing to the full extent of your licensure is all processes: examination, diagnosis and therapeutics, and the preparation and supply of eyeglasses and contact lenses. So therefore, that's what this statement means. Any restriction of your licensure is a restriction of your licensure, period. These are the states that currently have passed legislation similar to the Georgia statute and the Georgia Supreme Court ruling on Wilson versus Spectera. There are 13 states that can allow the provider to be in network and allow the provider to opt out, meaning the provider opts out of the vision insurance optical lab fulfillment system, and instead the provider prepares and supplies all frames, lenses, eyeglasses, and contact lenses directly to the patient. Bear in mind that 50 states allow you to go out of network completely, where you're not in network with any vision insurance plans. Anecdotally, in some of my speaking engagements and speaking to people at the office or through email, I think about 60 to 70% of the patients have opted out of the IMED contracts, about 35% of the VSP contracts. And the reason why it's not higher, because for years and years, all the optometrists, even now, continue to complain how the vision insurance plans control their office. To opt out, to stay in network and opt out requires an effort on your part. So unfortunately, a lot of providers are not willing to make that effort. We're going to discuss what's involved in making the decision as to which model you need to choose, which is best for your office. But bear in mind, there is an effort anytime that you change the operating system of your office. I always ask providers when I meet with them, can you tell me what percentage of your office is your medical and optical revenue? I often hear it's 50-50, 60-40 optical, 40% medical, but in reality, from the MBA and from our own analysis of our own office, we find that 83% of the revenue in a typical optometrist office comes from optical and 17% comes from medical. And to get to this percentage analysis, the 83% includes eye exams from vision insurance plans and optical materials from vision insurance plans, plus eye exams from medical insurance that result in the purchase of optical goods. The 17% is only eye exams that result in medical treatment by itself without the purchase of optical goods. We did an in-depth analysis, and this is a very accurate model for probably 80 to 90% of the typical optometric offices in the U.S. Just briefly, I want to speak about consumer trends and how it impacts your office, because patients come in, they're consumers. You do an eye exam, but they're consumers out front in your retail optical dispensary. For me, I noticed that most patients and consumers were trading up before the recession, but after the recession, they either stopped spending or became very, very price conscious. And the price consciousness has extended into today because of the internet. And I submit that hardly anybody wants to pay full price anymore. Everybody that I know of, including myself, and I would assume you, before you buy anything, you check on the line the quality of it, the reviews of it, of the product that you're looking at, and then you decide, are you buying it online, are you going to the store? It depends on the type of service you want. Are you going to set it up yourself and so forth? But nobody pays full price anymore. As a general rule, consumers can be divided into three groups. There's a small group at the top. These people do not buy sale items. They are high-level executives that shop 2 or 3 times a year. They may have somebody in a store that shops for them, and when they're ready to buy, they don't buy 1 suit, they buy 6 suits. They don't buy 2 pairs of socks, they buy 20 pairs of socks and 20 pairs of underwear. Most people fall into the middle group. They only buy on sale. There's a small group of people that only buy clearance items after the regular sale, but I find this to be true in my office. And we price our goods and we coordinate our optical retail with this in mind. And you'll see this later in our frame selection, in our frame inventory guide. I've been to a lot of meetings just like you, and everybody says what separates us from the Walmarts and so forth is our high level of patient experience and patient service. In my opinion, if you're in network with a vision insurance plan and you're dependent on the vision insurance plan's optical fulfillment system to deliver the frames, lenses, eyeglasses, and contact lenses to the patient rather than your office delivering that optical process, it is physically impossible to deliver a high level of patient service because you're not controlling the optical process. The only way that you can deliver Disney and Ritz-Carlton service is for you to control the optical process yourself. The first program that we're going to discuss is going out of network. A lot of optometrists have made the decision to stay out of network, meaning that you're going to control the entire optical process. You may choose to file insurance claims for the patient and have the insurance payment come to the office by accepting assignment, or you may have it sent directly to the patient. In either case, you're still out of network and you're controlling the entire optical process. This is a summary slide of the out-of-network reimbursements for exams, single vision, bifocal, and trifocal for frames and contact lenses. This is an important slide in you determining whether or not you're going to go out of network. For example, are you willing to take these exam reimbursements and write off the difference plus the copay? Are you willing to accept these lens costs as an out-of-network provider and write off the balance between the out-of-network reimbursements and the retail? Same on frames and same on contact lenses. So when you go out-of-network, you have to make a fundamental decision. Are you going to accept these reimbursements so that the patient's out-of-pocket costs are the same as if they were in-network? Or are you going to, and also are you going to accept assignment in general? Are you going to make the patient pay in full to the office and wait for the out-of-network reimbursements to go directly to the patient? So when you're deciding on out-of-network, for example, to control the optical process, you have to make these fundamental decisions as to whether or not the patient pays you in full, you accept assignment, and so forth. Can you pause it? Michael? Michael? Okay, I'm ready to go again. You can record again. Hello?
Okay, there we go. Ready to start?
This first slide, series of slides, is going to show you some examples of being out-of-network versus the insurance model. On the left side, it shows you being in-network with iMed and dependent on the iMed Vision Insurance Optical Fulfillment System. It shows this is for a Tier 1 progressive and a covered frame. It shows the lens reimbursement, your dispensing fee, your frame reimbursements, and here's your lens chargeback. You're not getting an optical lab bill like we discussed earlier. There's no cost of goods technically for the lens, just the chargeback, and there's your frame cost of goods. Now, here you do control the frame process. You're making approximately $73 in gross profit under iMed under a Tier 1 progressive and covered frame. Patient copay is $65. If you choose to go out of network and your retail price for that particular Tier 1 progressive is $195 and that retail price for the covered frame is $95, remember that you're now paying for the lens and the frame yourself. Well, if you're controlling your cost of goods well and you pay $25 for that Tier 1 progressive and you made a good buy on the frame and it's $10 on the frame cost of goods, and you can make $255 on the same process using the exact same frame and your progressive of choice. Here again, this gets into the dynamics of your office and your demographics of the patient. Under the insurance model, the patient's copay is $65. If you require the patient to pay in full at the time of service, they're going to have to pay you $255 and wait for their $130 to $150 reimbursement to come back directly to the patient. Or you can accept assignment on the iMed claim, and the patient then pays out of pocket to you $140 to $160, and you wait for the out-of-network assignment benefits to come directly to you. Here's another example with regard to VSP. Without going into great detail on all the different aspects of the insurance model, it would be a KA progressive, which is their entry-level progressive. You're going to make $94 on gross profit using the VSP vision insurance model. Out-of-network, same retail cost, you're going to make $255 gross profit on the same process. If you, again, ask the patient to pay in full, their out-of-pocket is going to be $290. VSP will pay $112 directly to either the patient or to your office, and if you accept the assignment, then the patient's going to pay $178. But again, when you go out-of-network, the patient typically is going to have a higher copay, if you will, because it's not technically a copay if you're out-of-network. But they're going to have a higher out-of-pocket cost, but your gross profit is going to be much higher, which means you can see less patients when you're out-of-network and make more than you would be under the vision insurance model. This is just a summary slide of a Tier 1 type progressive benefit. Under the vision insurance model on the left side, these are the patient copays for a Tier 1 progressive. And then again, looking at VSP Signature and Choice, this is directly from their guide. The $50 is a KA progressive under the Signature plan. It's a $55 copay under the Choice, and all the others come directly from the insurance contracts. You can look these up yourself, but these are the patient copays for progressive within the vision insurance optical fulfillment system. If you have a full retail cost here, that's $290, and these are the out-of-network patient costs with assignment of benefits, meaning you're going to accept vision insurance payment in addition to whatever the patient copay is or out-of-network costs are. You can see there's a significantly higher out-of-network patient payment directly to you, so you can expect some attrition if you go directly out of network. However, your gross profit is significantly higher, and you can afford to lose some patients through attrition under this scenario. And we're going to go in greater detail on this later in the presentation. This is a Tier 3 progressive presentation with iMed. On the left side is gross profit of $136. Again, you're getting to a higher frame cost, a higher tier progressive, and the gross profit is $136 under this model. If you go out of network, your retail price in the frame is $195, your progressive is $295, your gross profit goes up almost 300%, so it's $415 again. Are you going to accept assignment or make the patient or require the patient to pay out of pocket at the time of service? And again, this gets back to your practice and your demographics. What can the patient stand to bear in your practice? Same presentation with a VSP or Tier 3 progressive. Again, a significant difference between gross profit between the insurance optical lab fulfillment system and the private provider system. These are the summaries of the Tier 3 progressives. The typical patient copay is on the left. On the right column is the patient's copay if you accept assignment directly from the vision insurance plan to help mitigate the cost difference in the out-of-pocket expense. But there's still a significant difference between the patient copay and the out-of-network patient cost with assignment of benefits. But then again, you look at the gross profit. Can you pause it? Michael, did you hear me to pause it? Okay, I'm back. I'm ready.
Okay. Ready? I'm going to...
In summary, when you're in network, you're going to have reduced fees. The patient's going to have reduced copays also. You're going to be subject to chargebacks, less cost of goods, and you're going to be subject to mandatory discounts on multiple pairs. When you go out of network, you control the entire process. You can charge full retail price. You can have an option to discount multiple pairs. You can have an option to discount packages and so forth, but at least it's your call at this point. Now we're going to start talking about a different aspect of vision insurance. And I just want to emphasize that everybody's contracts are a little bit different, and so that the fees that you see presented they will vary from state to state and zone to zone in each state, and these are just representations. We're going to speak specifically of the opt-out model, which is the model that I practice. And this is the model that I won the case in Georgia against Spectera. And again, to emphasize, because this model is not spoken of much and it's a little harder to put your head around it, but I'm in network with VSP, I'm in network with Spectera, with Davis Vision, with iMed, Avisis, VBA, etc. So I see patients as an in-network provider, but I provide the optical goods directly from my own inventory and own optical lab fulfillment system. So this is called the opt-out model because I've opted out of the Vision Insurance optical lab fulfillment system. And these are typical opt-out reimbursements. I am not showing the slide for each individual insurance plan like I did on the out-of-network. The out-of-network reimbursements, just going back, those you can look online. You just Google VSP or iMed or Spectera Davis for their insurance plan, and you can pull up their insurance plans, and it shows what their out-of-network benefits are for every state and every plan in the U.S. It's really, really simple. And there's always a slight range on it. Certain plans have the exact same out-of-network benefits, and some have different ranges, so there's more of an average. But under the opt-out, reimbursements are a little bit more complex. So I've chosen just to summarize the reimbursements here. The single vision opt-out reimbursements can vary from the low end to $24 up to $53 for single vision lenses, from $34 to $78 on bifocals, from $45 to $108 on trifocals, and on covered frames, your reimbursements can be between $50 and $71, and your exam reimbursements between $40 and $70. Typically, the exam reimbursement under the opt-out model does not vary. Some of the vision insurance plans have reduced the exam reimbursements slightly to quote-unquote help offset the losses they've incurred by not supplying the optical goods directly to the patient. So sometimes when you opt out, you might see a $5 reduction in your exam reimbursement from your current in-network where you're using the Vision Insurance optical lab fulfillment system. Also, some insurance plans reimburse you based on a bifocal plus progressive copay, and some plans reimburse you on a trifocal plus progressive. It varies from plan to plan, but this is just a summary slide of what you can expect. And what you need to understand here is you're responsible for all ophthalmic goods with regard to cost of goods. You're supplying everything. And that's why you have to think about your optical dispensary and your optical processes differently than you do if you're using the Vision Insurance optical lab, because if you're using VSP or iMed, you almost don't care how much the progressive lens costs. So what difference does it make to you? You don't get a bill for that lens, so it doesn't bother you. In certain insurance plans, you don't even get a bill for the frame because the Vision Insurance optical lab is providing the frame, so there's no cost of goods, so you become lazy with regard to cost of goods. But when you opt out and you're providing all material to the patient, cost of goods is critical to performing well with regard to gross profit. So the summary slide here is an extremely critical slide because you need to look at yourself and say, can I live within this system? Can I survive on single vision lens reimbursements in this range, bifocal lens reimbursements in this range, trifocal, covered frames, and so forth? The reason being, if you're like a lot of offices, you've delegated all this process to someone who really doesn't have the business acumen, business training to understand cost of goods and gross profit. They may only have a high school education. You've not trained them on the controls within your optical dispensary because you probably didn't care either, because you weren't getting a bill for frames and lenses half the time because you weren't supplying them directly to the patient. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this concept because this is one of the keys to doing well under the opt-out model. With regard to progressive lenses, if you're getting a bifocal base fee plus the patient's copay, your total reimbursements are on the right column under a Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 progressive. This is your total reimbursement range under the opt-out model where you're supplying the progressive lens directly to the patient, and you're receiving a bill from the optical lab for the supply of that progressive lens, whether or not you're buying it, whether or not you're receiving it edged and cut, or whether you have your own in-house optical lab. This is your total reimbursement on the right. And so you start looking at these numbers and look at the lenses that you're using within your optical dispensary, and you have to decide, can you live within this scale of reimbursement? And if you are using lenses that will not fit within this scale, then you have to choose a different progressive family that will survive so that the patient receives a high quality progressive lens, and your office makes the correct gross profit here so that you do well financially. These are reimbursements for lens options. These are reimbursements for contact lenses. And when you look at the allowance and the payment, that just simply means if the patient purchases a supply of contact lenses, that's $150, let's say, and the insurance allowance is $120, the patient's going to pay you $30, and maybe you only get $105 back from the insurance, so you're taking a slight discount. So again, can you live within the payment that's going to come forward for the contact lenses that you dispense directly to the patient? This slide shows how you calculate your lens reimbursement. Up until a couple of years ago, all vision insurance plans reimburse lenses by the right column. But a couple of years ago, VSP went to a model for the opt-out system similar to their opt-in system, meaning there's a chargeback, but you also receive a lens lab payment. And we'll spend a little time on this. This one on the left is the one I get the most email about, is how to calculate the VSP total reimbursements when under the opt-out system. So the opt-out system under VSP, you're collecting the patient materials copay. You're still getting your lens dispense fee. So if you look under your fee column on the internet, under the VSP online system, you'll see your lens dispense fee for single vision, bifocal, and trifocal. You're going to get a lab fee, and the lab fee is paid by Plexus Optics via a direct deposit. So you are now considered a contract lab, no different than a contract lab that you dealt with when you were opting in under VSP, meaning you're getting paid a lab fee, plus you're getting paid a base lens lab fee, and the base lens lab fee plus the lab fee is a Plexus Optics direct payment into your checking account. And yes, they've put the chargeback in. So there is a chargeback. It's the same chargeback as if you were opting in, and that's your total revenue. All other vision and plans, iMed, Avisa, Spectera, VBA, etc., is simply the patient material copay plus whatever the lens payment fee is, meaning the single vision, bifocal, trifocal, and progressive, that's your total revenue. So that's how you calculate the lens payment to your office. This is a summary slide, and this slide is just a general concept that under the opt-out system that I use in my office, and I recommend if you're opting out, under the opting in system where you're using VSP and Spectera's optical lab fulfillment system, if you're with VSP, you often use the Unity Progressive and the Unity ARC because you're getting an extra dispensing fee for those type of products. But if then the patient comes in there with iMed the next year, maybe you're using an SR lens because you get a bump in profit on that, and then they go to Spectera the next year, and you're using Hoya because maybe that's what Spectera is using. So you tend to use the progressives associated with that vision insurance plan's optical lab fulfillment system. Well, that gets confusing out front with regard to the different lenses that you want to use. So instead of using 2 or 3 progressive, you're using 2 or 3 progressives for each vision insurance plan, and so you take 8 vision insurance plans, now you're up to 24 progressives they're using in the office. And each one behaves a little different. and you have trouble troubleshooting each progressive because it behaves a little different. The staff don't know to use Hoya or Essilor or Unity or Shamir or Seiko. They don't know what they're doing out front. Under the opt-out system, I personally use private label progressives. We most often use IoT. We use some Zeiss, and depending on the year and the model, we may switch family of lenses, but we only use 3 progressives in our office. We use an entry-level progressive, a mid-tier, and an upper tier. And it doesn't matter if the patient has VSP or iMed or Spectera. We don't care, because we're going to treat that patient as if they were a non-insurance cash patient. And what I mean by that is, when a patient is VSP, we're going to use our 3 progressives. If they have pay cash, it's the same 3 progressives. If they have iMed, it's the same 3 progressives. And the beauty of that is that the patient can switch insurance plans from year to year, but we're using the same progressives, so we dramatically decrease our non-adapts. We have very low spoilage in our lab because it's the same layout and blocking for the same progressives. Our optical dispensing staff can troubleshoot the progressives. They know how each progressive responds. There's only 3 to worry about. They know which lenses work best on the computer. They know which lens has best distance vision. They know which lens is the lowest price progressive. They're not worried about, is this VSP and which progressive to use, or iMed. We're using the same product over and over again. Now, 20 and 30 years ago, you could make the argument that private label progressives maybe weren't as high quality as the name brands because of the how each progressive was made back then with the different blanks and so forth. But now with the new software, and everything's driven by HD digital type lenses made from single vision lenses, it's really the software is driving the progressives now. And in my opinion, most progressives under the HD digital design that are software driven, I mean, you could possibly make the argument that some progressives may be a little higher quality than others, but I think the band has gotten real narrow here, and we've never had a problem switching from name brand to private label progressives. After I won the case on November 4th, 2013, which was a Monday, I just come back from Vision Expo West. I was wrecked that weekend because I knew the case was being shown at 8 o'clock on Monday morning on the website, and you could see whether or not you won or lost. After I won, and I started looking at everything, and I said, I'm going to have a lab meeting with all our lab people and our optical dispensing staff. And I made a lot of times I asked for opinions, but on this one I did not ask for an opinion from any of my staff. I walked in and I said, going forth, we're not using any name brand progressives. We're going to use private label progressives. And at the time, I believe I was using a Zeiss product and an IoT product, I believe, with the lenses I chose. We're going to use 3 progressives. And I said, I don't care if the patient has VSP or iMed or Spectera, and I don't care if they've been wearing a Shamir Autograph or a Verilux Comfort or a Zeiss, whatever the Zeiss High Individual, etc. I don't care. We're using these 3 lenses. And everyone in my lab said, well, nobody's going to adapt to them. They're not going to do well. They're not going to be able to see well. We're going to have all these remakes. It's just going to be horrible. Our office is going to suffer. And there was this loud groan. I said, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. I'm never using a Vision Insurance optical lab fulfillment system again. Either we're going to succeed with this model or we're going to shut our doors. I said, this is what we're going to do. And we went to private label, and some amazing things happened that we'll get into later, but it was not the problem. It actually made our office work better. With regard to frames, if you're dependent on your optical staff to do your frame buying with no guidance, then we're going to also talk about opportunity buys, and we're going to speak a little bit about practice management consultants. A lot of buying groups and alliances, obviously are making money on the spread between the product that they promote and what you're using. So everybody's got a little hand in the pot, with regard to the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System. When you exit that system, you have to be very savvy with regard to cost of goods. This first slide is an iMed example again about the opt-out. Again, we're still speaking about the opting out, meaning you're in network and fulfilling your own optical products directly to the patient. On the left is the same $73 gross profit that you had from the prior when you decide to go out of network. That doesn't change. What changes is the right column. Under the prior out-of-network model, you make a higher gross profit, but the patient's out-of-pocket is significantly higher, and there's a chance you might lose the patient because of the out-of-network patient out-of-pocket expense. Under the opt-out model, which is what the model I've chosen, your gross profit is almost twice as much under the opt-out system, but you're paying for all the cost of goods, so you have to be savvy about that, because if you look at the bottom right, if you go with what the lab consultants, the practice management consultants, and your frame consultants are telling you, and you buy the highest level branded Progressive and the highest level branded frame at wholesale cost, your gross profit can actually be lower under the opt-out system than under the Vision Insurance Lab system with regards to how you control your cost of goods. This is the same example with VSP. The left is the gross profit, which is the same as before under the out-of-network model slide I showed you. That does not change. The key, again, is on the right, how the gross profit is affected by your cost of goods. If you do not control your cost of goods, you will suffer when you go opt-out. This is a critical aspect of going opt-out. Remember that you're receiving a lab bill and a frame bill for all products. The one thing that is nice about the opt-out system is that the patient copay is the same whether or not you're opting in or opting out, because you're still in-network provider, so the patient copay does not change. The patient copay only changes when you go out of network, as shown earlier. The patient copay typically will increase under the out-of-network model, but the gross profit also goes up. But under the opt-out model, which is the model we're on now, the patient copay is the same whether or not you're opting in or opting out. That does not change. The only thing that changes is your gross profit and your ability to supply the optical products directly to the patient and controlling the service, the quality, and the timeliness of that optical fulfillment system directly to the patient. You control your gross profit depending on the products that you've selected with regard to lenses and frames. Again, this is a summary. It's showing you on the left side, if you do not control your frame and lens cost and use only name brand products with regard to lenses in frames, your gross profit is shown and your cost of goods is shown. When you opt out, you stay in network, but you opt out and use your own frames and own lenses in your own optical lab to control the service, quality, and timeliness of the optical product directly to the patient. Patient copay, again, stays the same, but your gross profit goes up dramatically because your cost of goods drops down when you control the process. So again, under the opt-out model, the cost of goods is the key to how well you do, just as the cost of goods is the key to how well you do under the out-of-network model. That aspect is the same. The only time the cost of goods is not as critical is when you're staying in network and you're using the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System. So if you stay in the Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System, your cost of goods is typically artificially low, because you may not be paying for some frames, you may not be paying for some contact lens supplies, and you're definitely not paying for lenses. You're not getting an optical bill for those lenses. But when you opt out, you stay in network and you opt out, or you go out of network, you're getting a bill for all optical products. So it's critical to control your cost of goods under that system. So one of the most important aspects, if you choose to opt out or go out of network, is you have to set up a system for your staff and for yourself to understand what lenses you're going to use, what family of progressives, what family of ARC coatings, transitions, and so forth. And then also in your frame, optical frame dispensary, you have to control the cost of goods with regard to frames. This is a same analysis when you're opting out of the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System, but staying in network. Left side is, again, this model does not change. The gross profit's the same, Tier 3 progressive and a premium frame. On the right side is your gross profit if you control the process yourself. And again, the bottom right shows that if you're using the name brand progressive and the name brand frame that your frame rep is selling you when they walk into the office, this is your gross profit. So even though your service would be improved, you're not making any more money. So again, cost of goods is critical. This is an example of VSP, Tier 3 progressive and frame and lens. Left side, again, gross profit under the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System. And on the right side is, again, the gross profit if you control the cost of goods and on the upper right, and if you use the branded progressive and frame. Michael, stop it, please. This next example is VSP with a Tier 3 progressive and a $250 retail frame. And again, on the left side, that gross profit is the same as out of network with regard to comparing the insurance optical lab fulfillment system to the private lab. Again, I keep repeating myself, but when you go out of network or you opt out of the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System but stay in network, controlling your cost of goods is the key to your gross profit. This is a summary of the Tier 3, meaning a Tier 3 progressive and a $250 retail frame, a higher end frame rather than a covered frame. The patient's copay under the opt-out model, again, to repeat, is the same under both systems. The gross profit varies dramatically depending on whether or not you're using private label, lower cost progressives, and opportunity buys on name brand frames or private label frames depending on your sourcing. The cost of goods is shown on the bottom again, name brands versus private label. The difference can be dramatic, up to 300%. This is a summary slide of Tier 1, Tier 3 progressive, covered frame, premium frame, and then ultra progressive and designer frame. The patient copays are the same whether or not you're opt-in or opt-out when you stay in network. The gross profit and the cost of goods can vary. And again, this is how you do well with regard to your reimbursements, is controlling the cost of goods on the right. I just realized I've been going through the slides a lot. There's a lot of data here. And after I won the case, one of the first things I did, besides telling my staff that we weren't going to use any of the lenses we've been using for the last, I don't know, 2013, it's 5 years ago, for the last 33 years. It was pretty sobering that morning. There was just blank faces in the office. But in addition to that, I decided I needed to create a spreadsheet. And I'm interjecting this here just because I think it's important that I remember to tell you this, is that we have a spreadsheet that we keep and we update it as needed. And the columns are, it shows your exam reimbursement, your frame reimbursement for a covered frame, your frame reimbursement for a $250 retail frame, your lens reimbursement for single vision, bifocal, trifocal, progressives Tier 1, 2, and 3, ARC 1, 2, and 3, transitions, poly, Trivex, high index. I think that's it on that. For every vision insurance plan across the board. So the vision insurance plan, or in the left column, in the upper horizontal column, are all the reimbursements. And we took us about 6 months to really figure this out. But once you know your reimbursements, then you can backtrack and understand where your frame costs fall in line. and also your lens cost. And you have to do this to really understand whether or not you're going to stay in network using the opt-in or vision insurance optical lab fulfillment system. You're going to stay in network and opting out and using your own optical lab fulfillment system, or you're just going to go out of network. But you have to have some baseline measurements to make that decision. With regard to this slide right here, and the reason why I mentioned the spreadsheet is this slide is really important. When you start putting this data on the spreadsheet, something becomes really apparent to you very, very quickly, is that the costs and the copays and reimbursements, that is your total revenue, do not increase as fast as the cost of goods for premium products. So just take a second, think about what I'm saying here. If you're in network and you're using the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System, you've been trained and your staff have been trained by your practice management people, by your vision insurance representatives, by your frame representatives. You've been trained that the only way that you can improve your gross profit is to go up the tier of frames and lenses with regard to complexity and costs, because the patient copays increase. But remember, your cost of goods is really not going up, because you're not getting a lens bill for a tier 1 progressive or an ultra premium progressive under the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System. So you're not really conscious of the cost of goods. But when you opt out or go out of network, or especially opt out in this case, the copays and reimbursements do not increase in a direct proportion as the premium products cost to you. So what happens is tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, it's a fairly linear rise between the copays and reimbursements. You can give the patient a good product, and you can make a decent gross profit. But when you get past the tier 3 progressive, the copay and reimbursement starts flatlining, and so that your wholesale cost of a premium progressive, let's say, may go from $75 to $125 for a $50 increase in wholesale cost. But the reimbursement and the patient copay for that same tier product only goes up $11. So what happens is, you'll notice when you start filling out your total reimbursements on this spreadsheet from all the vision insurance plans, you'll notice that you cannot use the highest tier products anymore if you opt out. You have to become comfortable with a different tier model system, because your gross profit can potentially decrease in the ultra premium progressive market. Well, that's a lot of data. I hope everybody's still awake. We're going to talk about frames. We're going to talk about 50% of your gross profit here. When you go to meetings, it's all about lenses. It's about this premium progressive, and this one has less distortion in the periphery, and this lens has the widest progressive, and this has the highest digital point of wear model system. And I understand that that's critical to success as the lenses, but from a gross profit standpoint, the frames are 50% of the battle. And if you remember from the earlier slides, whether or not you're in-network opting in or in-network opting out, the frame reimbursement does not change. It's the same. And your typical covered frame reimbursement is between $50 and $70 from a lot of the vision insurance plans. So if your staff is purchasing frames for $59.95 and you're getting $60 back from IMED, for example, you're not making any money. Why not buy the $59.95 frame at $8 so you can make $50 on that frame? Why aren't you doing that? Well, because you've delegated that to someone who doesn't really care, or maybe they're receiving SPIS from the frame company that you're unaware of. They're getting rebates or buying, or American Express gift cards and so forth, because they're buying 100 pieces of Safilo or 100 pieces of Marchand, and if they buy 100 pieces, they get a gift card. You're not even aware they're getting the gift card. So the frames become critical with regard to the overall process, whether or not you're opting in or opting out. So the frame aspect is critical under all three models, frame inventory, so it doesn't really matter which system you're choosing. What I'm showing you here is that under most frame optical dispensaries that I've looked at, and this is also shown in the MBA Academy report, the average frame cost under most offices is around $58 in most optical dispensaries. At Wilson Eye Center, my average frame cost varies between $28 and $30 for our average frame costs. And the first example shows a traditional model where you have 350 frames at the cost of $25, 500 at $50, and 250 frames at $75. So your total cost of goods is $52,500. Your reimbursement is going to be $80,000, and this comes from I just assigned $50, $60, and $70 with a different mix depending on VSP and IMED. This is your total reimbursement. Your gross profit is the difference between your reimbursement and the cost of goods. So your gross profit is $27,500. So your gross profit margin is 34%. If you learn how to buy properly and have the right inventory mix out in your optical dispensary, you're buying smarter. So you're buying the entry-level frames at $10 rather than $25. You're buying your mid-tier product at $25 cost rather than $50, and you're buying your upper-tier products. You may have to pay a similar dollar amount. Sometimes you can get them on sale. But look what happens to your total cost of goods in your dispensary. It drops from $52,500 to $25,500. Your reimbursement is going to drop a little bit because some of the frames you may not get as high a reimbursement depending on how you're reimbursed. For example, VSP pays you looks at both the wholesale and retail costs, whereas IMED IMED and VBA and Avisus and Davis and so forth only look at retail costs, so I put that variable in there. So your reimbursement is going to be a little bit less. However, look at what happens to your gross profit and the gross profit margin. This is where you want to be. You can buy outstanding frames and create a different dispensary experience for the patient, and they will not notice the difference. You just have to learn how to do it properly and set guidelines for it. If you buy your frame inventory correctly so that you've increased your frame profit gross profit of $49,000, and you also buy your single vision, bifocal, and progressives properly, and this is an example just showing ARC and transition just one per day. This is an opt-out example where you're in network and you've opted out, meaning that you're supplying all the products yourself and paying for all the products yourself. This is your potential lens and frame gross profit. And this is minor right here, meaning I know that everybody listening dispenses more than one ARC-coated lens per day, and they dispense more than one transitions per day. But this is your gross profit under the opt-out model when you control your frame costs properly and you control your lens costs properly. The 50%, 15, and 35 is a blend of looking at my wholesale optical lab business, the VSP reports, and just general reports. And this is a typical mix with a lot of practices in the U.S. This is a summary slide, and again, the cost of goods, I keep beating you over the head. When you go out of network or you opt out of the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System, controlling your cost of goods is the most important aspect of whether or not you're going to do well financially. With regard to your tiers and categories, your Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 progressives are the most profitable categories of them all. Remember, in an earlier slide, I said that the copays and reimbursements do not rise as quickly as the higher tiers with regard to cost of goods. Approved private label progressives are critical to success. We only use lenses that fall within certain tiers and categories so that when we get audited and the vision insurance companies look at the brands of progressive and what tier you're using for the patient, what copay you're charging, just like your exam records get looked at that you've done intraocular pressures, you've dilated the patient, you've measured ocular motility, you've recorded visual acuity, you've done your case history. When vision insurance plans look at you, if you're opting out, they're going to verify that, because they don't know what you're using. Remember, when you're using the vision insurance optical lab fulfillment system, they have a record of what you've used. They know what frame you've used. They know what lenses you've used because they've supplied the lenses. They know what coating you've used. They know what, if you've used transitions. They know exactly what you're using. And so they have a record of that. But when you opt out, they don't know who you're buying the lenses from, because you can buy them from any place you want. You can buy your coatings. You can buy anything you want because you've opted out of the vision insurance optical lab fulfillment system. So when you get audited by a vision insurance plan and you've opted out, you have to submit invoices showing the frames, showing the lenses, showing the coatings. You submit the patient ledger showing what the copay is and so forth. And so it's really important that you used approved private label progressives and approved coatings and so forth. And you're saying, well, I've opted out. Yes, you've opted out, but you're still a network provider. So if you're a network provider, you still have to go by the in-network rules with regards to copays within the tiers of progressives and coatings and so forth, and the appropriate copays to the patient and how you process the claims. That has not changed. The only thing that's changed is that you're providing the product yourself versus using the vision insurance optical lab fulfillment system. And finally, the frame inventory mixture that we discussed earlier, you do not want to have covered frames that you're paying $60 for that are being reimbursed at $60. And we're going to discuss this a little bit more in a bit. This is a very powerful slide here. The slide on the left is, I don't know, 98% of the optometrists in the U.S. That means that those providers are in network and using the optical lab fulfillment model. Those providers have no control over the optical lab fulfillment system. Those providers cannot provide a high level of patient service or timeliness or quality control because they're not controlling the optical process directly themselves to the patient. If a vision insurance plan's optical lab is providing poor quality to you, you can't switch labs. You don't switch labs. You're in network and you've opted into their system. If you have a cash patient and you're providing the optical product directly to the patient and the lab is a poor lab, you switch labs because you're not going to stay with the bad lab because it gives poor patient service, poor quality, and the timeliness is nowhere to be found because you're sending the product back and forth because it fails quality control inspection. So if you're in the 37-state model, you're getting a low gross profit and you're not controlling the process. And if the lab is a poor lab, you cannot change labs. You're stuck. If you're in 13 states that have given you the ability to opt out, like Georgia did, then if you continue using the name brand product frames and the name brand product lenses, your gross profit only goes up slightly. Yes, your service, your quality control, and your timeliness goes up dramatically. So the patient's quality, the patient's service goes up dramatically, but your gross profit does not. However, if you opt out and control the brands of progressive you're using, you control the frame buying process as shown previously, you can, for the same amount of patients, instead of your gross profit being $82,500, your gross profit for those exact same patients will be $133,575. And that's seeing the same amount of patients, you providing the frames, lenses, and the optical process directly to the patient. If you go out of network, see what happens. Your gross profit goes up dramatically. The key on the outer network is whether or not you can sustain patient attrition because of the increased out-of-pocket expense to the patient. And you have to, we'll look at that later, with what your practice can lose and still come out ahead. This is a summary slide showing the typical gross profit margin of the practices in the U.S. Supposedly it's around 61%, and I think that's pretty close. We've looked at it in our office. Our office has typically in the 62 to 65% range. It varies a little bit from year to year depending on insurance reimbursements, and I don't mean just insurance vision plans, but it could also be medical plans as well. And insurance plans vary from year to year on what their insurance reimbursements are. If you look at your average managed care vision care discount off your retail price, you're typically giving about a 30% discount. Some plans as high as 40%, but I'm using 30% as this example. According to the slides that we're going to show in just a second, you have to increase your patient volume about 100% to equal the same gross profit if you discount fees by 30%. So you have to double your patient volume. When you take vision insurance plans and you decrease the gross profit by 30%, that's as if you're in network and using the vision insurance optical lab fulfillment system. On the other hand, if you increase your fees by 30%, you can sustain the loss of 33% of your patient volume. And this statement really has to do with out-of-network, because if you go out-of-network, you're not going to have a discount with the vision insurance plan, so you're going to be increasing your fees. So you can increase your fees, and you can lose over 30% of your patient base and still come out ahead when you go out-of-network. The next statement has to do with these same statistical models. You have to see 9 managed vision care patients per day to equal the gross profit of 5 out of network. And again, this goes back to the first statement about you have to increase your patient volume by 100% to equal the same gross profit if you discount fees by 30%. This ties back into that. How busy do you want to do? Do you like a high volume practice? Do you like a slow volume practice where you spend more time with the patient? Your patient demographics. This is something you have to look at your individual practice and make these type of decisions. In general, reimbursements and gross profit only paint part of the picture. We've spoken about service and timeliness in Ritz-Carlton, and again, I don't think that anybody's capable of providing the service and quality and timeliness directly to the patient if they're not controlling the product themselves. But what was interesting, some things happened in our office after we went opt-out, and the same thing would happen if you go out of network. When you decide to only use 3 progressives, you start making less mistakes in the lab. You start making less measurement errors in the optical dispensary. And as a result, you have less redos, you have less lab spoilage, less lens spoilage, less frame frame changes. So the optical dispenser in your office calms down with regard to what copay to collect and what lens to choose and what layout to use and what lab to order this lens from. You're only ordering from whatever lab you want. In our office, we actually only use one wholesale optical lab. Right now, if you're using a vision insurance system, you're using multiple labs because you have to use whatever the insurance lab tells you to do. If you go out of network and you do go or opt out, but stay in network, you can use 1 lab, 2 labs, whatever you want. Personally, I like using just 1 optical lab because we're only sending 1 lab order per day over the internet. It's really, really simple. So we don't have to worry about comparing different labs' prices and getting different invoices and different warranties and so forth. It makes everything really, really simple. Out front of the dispensary, because we're only using 3 progressive lenses, our copays are real simple because it's the same lens across all insurance plans, same ARC, same transitions, same high index. We know what our copays are, what the patient's supposed to pay us, what our reimbursement is going to be. It just makes everything really simple. From a vision insurance management process, our staff who are filing insurance claims, again, it's really, really simple. They're using 3 lenses, 3 coatings, 3 transitions. They know exactly what modifier to use and what to expect in reimbursement. It simplifies the vision insurance processes within our office. from an optical dispensary management standpoint, we have 3 lenses and 3 prices. We don't have 24 lenses and 24 different prices. It's a nightmare under the old system. Also, if you control your frame inventory costs by buying better, your ad valorem taxes and your property taxes will be lower because your frame inventory costs are lower. And you can have a little bit lower patient volume if you choose to go out of network with a higher gross profit. So across the board, your office becomes easier to manage, your insurance department becomes easier to manage, your optical lab becomes easier to manage because there's less spoilage, your optical dispensary staff are less confused. They're using the same progressive, whether or not it's cash patient, VSP, iMed, Spectera, VBA, Davis Vision, it doesn't matter to them. We're using the same products across the board as an opt-out office, and it would be the same thing as out-of-network. They're identical except you're in-network or you're out-of-network. Some additional things that we noticed besides increasing the patient service of your optical lab fulfillment system is down at the bottom where it says additional patient revenue available for second pairs. Under the opt-out model, remember the copays are the same, whether or not you're opting out or opting in. The patient copay is the same because you're still within the vision insurance plan's contract. And so by keeping the patient copay low or lower than out of network, the patient has additional revenue for second pairs. Our second pair volume in our office usually is between 8 and 12% each month, so we feel good about that many patients getting second pairs. And also on the opt-out model, because the copay is the same, our patient retention is real good. Remember, I've said that the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 progressives and mid-tier frame products are where we feel like we should be under the opt-out model. When a patient comes in and they're within you're operating under the in-network and opt-in system, meaning you're using the vision insurance plans model, you've been trained to sell the patient the most expensive progressive on the market, the highest cost frame on the market. That's the only way you can make some extra money because your reimbursements are lower under the opt-in system. Well, when you go opt-out, you're back into Tier 1, 2, and 3 in the mid-tier frame market, so your patient out-of-pocket expenses are lower. They don't get sticker shock because they come in with a $25 copay on their materials, and under the opt-in system, they leave with a $600 copay under the traditional opt-in system because you fit them in the most expensive products across the board because that's how you make extra money. Under the opt-out model, you don't have to do that. You can increase your gross profit by staying in the lower and mid-tier range, and so the patient's out-of-pocket is easily controllable because it's a third of that, and so you retain your patients. I think there's a significant problem and a significant shift right now that I'm seeing in the marketplace where the patients who go to the private provider with vision plans with $25 material copays, and they're leaving with $400, $500, $600 copays because you're giving them the most expensive progressive lens, the most expensive coating, the most expensive frame. That's the only way you can make extra money. Well, under the opt-out model, you can go back to a mid-tier frame and lens offering, increase your gross profit, and the patient's out-of-pocket is much lower, and they have money to buy a second pair. Plus, you control the quality of the product, the timeliness, and the service. It's just amazing to me. We only have 13 states, but even within those 13 states, I'm always amazed that the provider is not willing to take the time and effort to switch to opt-out because it's a win-win situation across the board. Control of quality of service, timeliness to the patient. Your gross profit goes up. Your patient's copay decreases under this system, but your gross profit is maintained even on the lower tier product. Your second pairs go up, you retain the patient. I don't see how you cannot do this if you have that ability in those 13 states. Looking at everything combined, I know I've gone over everything very quickly. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of statistics. And again, I think the starting point for us and for you is to create a spreadsheet, and it's not that hard. First column is exam. Second column is covered frame. Third column is $250 retail frame. Next columns are single vision, bifocal, meaning a flat top 28, and then a 7x28 trifocal. Then 3 tiers of progressives, depending on your office, 3 tiers of ARC coatings, transitions, high index, poly, Trivex, etc. Know what your reimbursements are. Your reimbursements and patient copays are the same under the opt-in and opt-out model, meaning that what you're getting back is going to be basically the same from IMED and VSP and so forth, except for certain lab costs and payments. But you need to know your costs, because then you can control what family of lenses you're going to use and what family of frames you're going to use. So once you have that in line, can you live with a mid-tier progressive? Can you live with a mid-tier frame? Can you set up a system to control your frame costs? Is that something that you're willing to do when you go opt-out? You have to think about your patient demographics, your patient income. Do you want to have a high volume or low volume practice? Is your facility location, is it a high-end practice or a low-end practice? Is your branding high-end or low-end? Do you have enough staff to control a higher market volume? Are you willing to control the cost of goods, both opting out and out of network? You have to be prepared to understand and how to do that. Same thing on optical lab services. When we went opt-out, we were making all our glasses ourselves. So all of a sudden, instead of VSP making the contract labs making the glasses, Wilson Eye Center is making the glasses. So VSP becomes in-house, and IMED becomes in-house, and Adesis becomes in-house, and Davis Vision and Spectera become in-house. So if we were only making 25 pair of glasses a day, now all of a sudden we're making 50 pair of glasses, we're seeing the same number of patients, but we're making more eyeglasses because we opted out, because we're still in network, so we're seeing the same volume of patients per day, but we're now making more glasses. So some things happened. Is number one is we started selling more frames, so we had to increase our frame inventory. We started selling more stock single vision lenses, so we had to increase our stock single vision lens category. We had to increase our supplies for our optical lab, for our frame cases. We had to hire more staff because we had to have more people, had to have more bench opticians to handle the increased volume in the dispensary. We had to have more in the optical lab. We had to hire more optical dispensary staff out front, because even though you wouldn't think so, but by having the product come quicker, our volume of patients per day increased, because we were starting to, as an opt-out model, we had a faster turnaround on our products. So that was part of the timeliness increase and part of our patient service increase directly to the patient. Now, under the out-of-network model, there's a chance, because of the higher patient higher out-of-pocket cost to the patient, your patient volume may decrease. So some of these aspects of the opt-out may not affect the out-of-network. Remember, you might have a lower volume because of increased out-of-pocket cost by the patient. So you may not have to change your frame inventory, your stock lenses, your bench opticians, and so forth. And again, you won't know that till 6 or 12 or 18 months into the process. This is a slide I alluded to earlier about the patient volume with regard to in-network and opt-out. If your present margin is 60%, and according to MBA study, it's 61% for the average optometrist, and if you're discounting your fees by 30%, which is a general discount, it can be as high as 40% with regard to vision insurance, you have to see twice as many patients, 100% more patients, to maintain the same gross profit. And this has to do with being in network and opting out. When you opt out, you can control your your cost of goods, and you can decrease how much you're having to give a discount for with regard to the vision insurance plans. If you go out of network, you're going to be increasing the reimbursement by a minimum of 30% or more. And here you can sustain up to a 33% decrease in patients. In reality, I think your margin's going to go up higher than 30%, and so you can sustain even a greater loss of patients. In addition to not just looking at eyeglasses and contact lenses, obviously, if you're going out of network, hopefully you're also hedging your bet by adding additional services like dry eye treatment and co-management and so forth to your office that maybe you're not doing now. The big thing is how hard you want to work at it. If you want to continue to complain, which is what I hear a lot of, that bothers me, is you're going to continue to complain that the vision insurance plans are destroying your office because of their control in the lab network, and your reimbursements have gone down and you don't get to do anything that you want. The patients are complaining because of the quality or the slow turnaround time on the eyeglasses or contact lenses, etc. I hear a lot of complaining, but if you want to stop complaining and increase your patient service, timeliness, and quality control, then you have to sit down and create a timeline as to what you need to do in your office. And this is true both opting out or going out of network. In both processes, remember, you're going to now take complete control over the preparation supply of the frames, lenses, eyeglasses, and contact lenses. And we spoke to potentially increase volume, increase inventory, and so forth. So you have to think about the processes. And be honest with you, I was not completely prepared. I won the case on November 4th, 2013. And on November 5th, 2013, I opted out of everything. So I went cold turkey, whatever the right term is. I just jumped in, and the initial 6 months were a little chaotic for me because I had not created a spreadsheet. I didn't know what my total reimbursements were. I didn't understand all my costs. I was not prepared for the increase in volume in my optical lab. I didn't really know. And so you have to set timelines. And so part of the different timelines, my first timeline would be getting the spreadsheet set up. And then I would look what lenses are you going to use in your lab? What progressive lenses? You've got to know your costs. Are you going to stay with your current lab? Are you going to use a private label lens, and which family of lenses? I would strongly suggest a maximum of 3 lenses. So you have to negotiate with your lab to use the correct progressive lenses. What ARCs are you going to use? Because if you know your reimbursements are $52 and the ARC you're using now costs you $75, you can't use that ARC. You have to find an ARC that falls within the reimbursement schedule on the spreadsheet that you've created. You now know that you don't want to use a covered frame that costs you $60 if you're getting reimbursed $60. So what do you do there? Are you going to increase your single vision stock lens selection? We've increased ours now for the 4th time in the last 5 years. We just increased it recently by another 700. You've got to create guidelines out front so that the staff know what lenses and coatings you're using, what copays. They're going to have a single sheet out front that controls the entire process for every vision insurance plan. They'll know the copay. They'll know what what lenses to use, what coating. It simplifies your office, but you have to set up a timeline as to how you want to do this. Are you going to jump in and do all insurance plans simultaneously like I did? Or are you going to do one at a time? Are you going to choose the vision insurance plan that has the highest impact on your office? That's 48% of your office. Are you going to choose one that's relatively small and work around it that's only 5% of your gross revenue? I don't have an exact answer for you. Personally, the VSP opt-out system is rather complex, and I would probably tell you not to do that one to start with. I think all the others, iMed and Visas, VBA, Spectera, Davis Vision, those are relatively simple. Those are the easiest, so you may want to consider using one of those, especially one that's a lower percentage of your gross revenue so you can understand the process better. But in any event, you cannot walk into your lab or your optical dispensary or to your insurance department and say, we're opting out next week and I want you to put it together and tell me what I need to do. That will not work. Your staff do not understand the contracts. They do not understand the reimbursements. They have no guidance on frame inventory control. They don't know which progressive they should use because they've been listening to lens reps who tell them to only use the most expensive lens. They've been listening to frame reps that tell them to buy certain products. They can get a gift card in 6 weeks. You have to control the process. So if you're willing to do some extra work and reap the benefits of an increase in patient service, quality control, and timeliness, and an increase in gross profit, and an increase in control of your office, then you have to be willing to do the work. You went through undergraduate school, you went through optometry school, you took boards, you've passed everything, you've taken organic, you've taken physics, you've done everything. This is a little hard to do at first, but it'll probably take you approximately 6 months to get through it. And that means staying late 2 or 3 nights a week, working through lunch, coming in on a Saturday and working 2 or 3 hours. You just set long-term goals and break it up into short-term goals, but you can get through it. And eventually you won't be complaining about the vision insurance plans anymore because you will be controlling the process. Besides some of the other things I mentioned to you, one thing that when you're setting up your guidelines within your optical dispensary, if you go online, you look at Warby Parker or you look at JINS, J-I-N-S, what you'll see is Warby Parker has a page online that has a website link for their insurance forms to download. So what they're saying to you is you have to pay us, and then you can get reimbursed yourself. So this goes back, if you go out of network, are you going to file for the patient and accept assignment? Are you going to have pre-printed forms? Are you going to have something they can download? Are you going to use Patch to do your filing, which is an internet filing service that can file for your benefits, and they can do it either out of network or, they can either do it for you accepting assignment or for the payment going to the patient. If you accept assignment, typically you're going to get paid in 7 to 10 days. If you don't accept assignment, the burden obviously is shifted to the patient, but the patient's out-of-pocket expenses are going to go up dramatically. This is the page from Warby Parker right here. Remember never to overpromise. Michael, stop it. I want to go back. Another thing I want to speak to you about with regard to Warby Parker, there's a company in California called JINS, J-I-N-S, that you can look online. And when you look at Warby Parker's online and other 800-type eyeglass places, there's something that when you go out of network or you opt out, it's really important, I think, that you think about decreasing the choices again. Remember I said I use 3 progressives, I use a couple of coatings and so forth. When you go online, the patient only has one progressive choice. They have one ARC choice. They only have one transition. They have one Polaroid. When you opt out or you go out of network, you need to decrease the patient choice because nobody wants 1,000 things to choose from anymore. When you go to buy a car, there's 3 trim models and there's 3 or 4 packages. You can finish buying a car, not in the price negotiation, but you can buy the trim model and pick out the options you want. In 15 minutes, you're done. My office is designed that way. We looked at Warby Parker and JINS and other services, and when we opted out and we didn't have to use each individual vision insurance optical fulfillment system, we drastically reduced our lens offerings out front because we're only using the same lenses over and over again no matter what vision plan. So our lens selection process is very fast. It's single vision, bifocal, trifocal, progressive 1, 2, and 3, a couple of ARC coatings, 1 transitions, 1 high index, 1 poly, 1 Trivex. We're done. I mean, it's a real simple process. The patients like it because they're not giving 35 choices of progressives and 10 choices of ARC. Think about it. The patient is confused. They get a higher out-of-pocket copay in these higher tier products. Your staff don't even know what they're using. They're collecting the wrong copay. It becomes a real simple process, and everybody's happy. Your insurance department is following the same lenses. Everything becomes really, really simple. So no matter what you do, at the end of the 6-month or 12-month process, when you opt out, everything becomes really, really simple, and the staff calm down, your office calms down. So just remember this aspect of the office. And finally, this is one of my favorite slides. I get my car washed here. Never overpromise. This slide says $375, wash as long as you like, up to 20 minutes. So just remember, when you sell extended protection plans and you promise the glasses to be ready in an hour and so forth, just make sure you deliver on your promise. You cannot deliver on your promise if you're in network and using the Vision Insurance Optical Lab Fulfillment System. You are dependent on their service. If you're opting out so that you're controlling the product delivery time and service and quality, or you're out of network, either of those two options, you can deliver what you promise. You will never overpromise again. Thank you for your time, and I hope you learned something today. Good luck. I'm done. On controlling your frame inventory, it's important that you understand that your frame reimbursements on the in-network model, where you're opting in, or where you're in network and opting out, so that your frame reimbursements are in the $50 to $70 frame range for the covered frames. It's real important that you set specific guidelines for your optical dispenser, whoever's buying the frames. Otherwise, you're just going to be trading dollars, meaning that you may have paid $60 for the frame, you're getting $60 frame reimbursement, and you're not making any money. If you go to the larger trade shows like Vision Expo East and Vision Expo West, it may be happening at the smaller trade shows, but to me it's harder at those. I find that the larger trade shows are much easier to do this at. But for example, you may walk into Marchand, and Marchand has made too many frames in a certain category. And frames that were costing you $59.95, you can buy for $6 and $8. You may walk into, I remember at a Vision Expo West, Steve Madden, I think it's Colors and Optics, they had frame overage. So we walked in there, we said, do you have any frame specials? We do this at both East and West, and we just randomly walk into certain booths. And they said, oh yeah, Steve Madden, you can buy as many as you want. They're $6.95 each. The thing is that $6.95, those frames were $59 to $69. So we're getting, we could either use it as a covered frame or a mid-tier price, but we're getting a good spread on the reimbursement from the wholesale cost, plus any overage if it's above your covered amount. So that, and then I remember another time going into Altair, and we had never carried Joseph Abood and I think Tommy Bahama, and the first order, every frame was 50% off. Last month, in May of 2018, we got an email from Safilo that a large percentage of the Safilo frame line was 60% off. That included brand new Jimmy Choo, Max Mara, Marc Jacobs. We just bought 400 of those products at 60% off, but we marked them at full retail out front. So those frames are in the $300, $400, and $500 range, but we got them at 60% off of whatever the wholesale cost is. And the point being is that you have to be willing to go to a frame show and look for opportunity buys. Because if you're dependent on your frame rep coming into your office and showing you opportunity buys, you're not going to get opportunity buys because they're making a higher commission on a full wholesale cost frame. So it's not in their best interest to let you know about opportunity buys and specials like that. So you have to seek them out. Now, on your frame boards, we do things a little differently with regard to how we manage our optical dispensary. We have 3 sections in our office. We have frames that are color-coded on their tags. If a VSP patient says, I only want a covered frame, then we have those frames tagged a certain way. We say, Mrs. Jones, these frames are covered in full by your VSP plan. But we tell Mrs. Jones that she can purchase any frame in this dispensary that she wants. It doesn't matter to us, but we know these frames are covered. We have a different color-coded tag if an iMed or Davis Vision patient comes in and says they want a covered frame. In those frames, because they're based on retail pricing only, we can purchase those frames a little bit less. So maybe we're buying those frames in the $4 to $6 per frame cost. We're getting $60 back, let's say, on those. However, the frame wholesale catalog may only be $29.95, but the reimbursement's based on retail, so we're getting the retail reimbursement. Going back to the VSP frame section, VSP looks at both wholesale and retail costs. And so we've got to have frames in the VSP section that have a minimum purchase of $59.90, wholesale purchase price in the frame fax catalog of $59.95, so we can get the full $60 reimbursement. Plus, we like having Marchand frames there, so we get an extra $10 being a premier account. So we have our frames separated into a VSP covered section, other vision insurance plans like iMed, VBA, Spectera, Davis in a separate section, and then our regular price product. And again, a patient who has VSP or iMed, they can purchase any frame they want in the office, but if they ask where the covered frames, we have them organized so that the covered frames mean no patient out-of-pocket expense other than any material copay. So we don't have to look at every frame in the dispensary. If a patient says, I want to use my frame allowance to buy a nicer or more expensive frame, then we can do that. But in any case, when you go to the vision shows, you want to look for products that you can fulfill within the spectrum, meaning in VSP, if you can limit your choices to Marchand, if you're a premier account, you're going to make extra money. On iMed and VBA and Avisus and Davis Vision, you want to drive down the wholesale costs because it's based the reimbursement is based purely on retail, not wholesale, not the frames fax book. And then on the rest of the office, you need to look at opportunity buys. You walk into a booth and maybe there's a Steve Madden sale or there's a Jimmy Choo sale. Safalo 5 years ago, I remember at Vision Expo West, they had a special that if you bought one line of frames that you've not carried in the last 12 months, it was 20% off. If you bought 2 lines of frames, it was 30% off. If you bought 3 lines of frames that you've not carried in the last 12 months, it was 40% off. If you bought 5 lines of frames that you've not carried in the last 12 months, it was 50% off. Just recently, we got 60% off of everything. So you can, even in your higher end margin sections, if you're patient and are willing to have some extra inventory, you can take advantage of these opportunity buys and drive down drastically your cost of inventory, increase your gross profit at the same time, and still carry quality products. Now, one caveat to this is that at Vision Expo East and Vision Expo West, you have to plan ahead when you go to these shows because certain vendors will not show you their opportunity buys unless you've made an appointment ahead of time. You should make these appointments at least 90 days in advance because the appointment slots go very, very fast. We make our Marchand appointment 3 months out. We make all our appointments 3 months out because if you want to have a shot at the opportunity buys before they're gone, and what I mean by gone, you're going to have Chains buying them, you're going to have Pearl buying them, My Eye Doctor's buying them. You're going to be in the same booth with them buying product, but you can't go in there and buy 25. You have to be prepared to buy 200, 300, and 400 of them, or else you're not going to get an appointment. And don't be scared to do that because if you're buying 300 frames at $20 versus 300 frames at $70, you can afford $6,000 worth of frames versus $21,000 of frames. So the beauty of this is that you will increase your gross profit, decrease your inventory costs, and still have a great product to give to the patient. So you need to put a lot of thought into looking at your inventory, how you're going to stage your inventory out front with regard to managed care inventory and full retail inventory. But you have to, again, planning it, the process is critical to success. Okay, I got it. That's it.